Learning to code can be a pretty big mission, and when learning to build mobile apps, one of the best things to do is to build your own product. I'm gonna give you a list of the 10 first projects that I built or tried to build in order to learn programming, and how difficult they are and how CV worthy they are. And we're gonna start with the easiest and we're gonna end with the most difficult. And I'm gonna give you a brief explanation of each project and then help you get on the way to building that. Number one is a simple BMI calculator app. So to calculate BMI is just a simple math formula. What you would do here is you would set up an app with two fields. One would be height, one would be weight, and it would be a button, calculate. After you press calculate, a function will execute and it will demonstrate your BMI on the screen. Super simple, not really CV worthy, but a good way to get started with some basic UI and some basic functions. Number two was a to-do list app. So I built a simple to-do list app where you, in the local storage of the phone using shared preferences, you input a task and that task had a status and an ID. And then after clicking done on that task, that status would change to done, and it would change the UI slightly by having a little checkbox that was ticked. This will help you work a little bit with state memory, but it will also help you work with some basic UI and some more advanced features like list build. It's just a little bit more difficult, but it's not really CV worthy either, but it's a good way to get some experiences building apps. Number three was actually something that I did live on YouTube, and that was to build a weather app. This was a little bit more difficult because this involved using an API, and there are plenty of free APIs that you can do to fetch the weather. So just go and Google that. It's super simple. And what you do here is that you get an HTTP response that you send a query to the weather app, you pull the weather for the particular location, and you display that in the UI. It's a lot simpler than it sounds, but it's a very good way to start working with state management, but also with RESTful APIs and HTTP requests. And what you could do here is that you could ask the user to type in a city, they press enter. As they press enter, you execute a small function that goes out to that API, fetches the weather for the location that they've entered, and displays that in a simple text UI. This is not really CV worthy either, but it's a little bit more difficult because it does involve some more complex state management and working with some APIs. Number four was that I built a simple calculator app. And this is a little bit more difficult because here you need to have the functionality of various different types of functions. So when you write the function, typically like in the API we just mentioned before, you have one function that goes out and fetches weather data for one location. Now you need to prepare to handle different operations. So it can be plus, it can be minus, it can be the square root or whatever, and then you need to be able to sequence this. So you will have to figure out a little bit more how to process this and how to display this. Obviously this is not super difficult in regards to building it out in the function wise, because you can do a lot of these math operations within the code. But what's difficult, or what I found difficult, was to make a nice looking, good looking calculator UI that can fit all of the buttons, that can have you press one button to display another set of buttons. So this will help you a little bit working with statefulness, but also altering the UI based on some user input. This is again not really CV worthy, but we're moving down that complexity scale slightly. Number five that I built was a habit tracker. And now this is a little bit more complex because I actually did this using Firebase. And Firebase is a backend service that you can use. And I think that it's a very good option if you're building apps using Flutter in particular. There are some other options like AWS or like Supabase, for example, but I really like using Firebase just because how easy it integrates both with authentication, storage, but also a real-time Firestore database. So what you could do here is that you could ask the user to, from them then, input a particular habit. Maybe that could be go to the gym. And then based on that, you display a UI that says, did you do this today? Did you do this today? Did you do this today? For the whole week. And after that, you let the user tick off every day that they did it. And then to add some more features here, you could work on some charts using the package FL chart, for example, and you could display how well they've kept up with their habits over the week and add some more complex UI elements to this. This is a little bit CV worthy if you manage to publish this. It's definitely CV worthy if you manage to publish it, and it's a little bit more difficult just because of all of the moving parts that are involved. But I think a habits app is a pretty good middle ground app to build. That's not going to take you too long, but it's a relatively impressive and fun project to do. Number six was one that I actually started and I pretty much completed it, but I never really launched it, and that was an e-commerce app. I built this for one of the businesses that I have just to experiment with a little bit, and this involved, for example, fetching a Google product feed, which ended up not being the perfect solution, but it worked to some degree. and then making a checkout by simulating an order and sending it to the web shop. So this was a little bit more complex, and this did include some cloud functions, which is another part that you can use Firebase for, which is essentially where you execute a function in the cloud and you change the database somehow. And this was to fetch payment history or payment status, for example, because sometimes it takes a little bit of time for a payment to go through. And then also you need to build a nice UI here where users can add something to a cart. If you wanted to go real advanced, you could do something like stock management. But I think this is a fun, simple project that you could build for a local business in your vicinity, or you could just build it as a test app. If you build it as a test app, it's maybe CV worthy to mention somewhere, but it's definitely on the more difficult scale of app development. Number 7 would be a chat application. I think here you could go 2 different levels of complexity. One could be using a package like Stream, for example, where you just integrate their chat UI and their chat functionality into your app. This is relatively simple, good if you're implementing this in another part of another app, but it can also be a standalone feature if you're specializing it somehow. The more complex way is to build this using Firebase. So here you'll need to set up a repository inside of Firebase where you can store all the messages. You need to ID them and label them properly so they can be filtered through and sorted through in the most efficient way. And what I've found this to be very good at is practicing and learning about Firebase and storage of data, because you need to sequence and you need to ID and index this data. So these are all now complex words that I'm using, but if you choose to pursue this project, you're going to learn and doing that in the most efficient way possible so that you can actually work with the data that you store in the database. Then you need to fetch all of this information, you need to display it in a nice UI that when you click a button, it sends a message by uploading that to the Firebase, and on the other user's hand or on the other user's device, which is the user you're in a chat with, it also updates their UI to display the new chat. Number 8 that I built was actually one of the apps that I launched, but this was an audio player. And this app is actually out there. It's called Wonder Sagas. It's a platform for children's audio stories. I have a whole video series about that. That was actually the first part of my YouTube channel. You can go back and you can watch that. But what this was a simple way to store all of the files inside of Firebase Firestore and then fetching those audio files and playing them on the user's device. This is a little bit more complex than it sounds because you need to be able to handle the state very efficiently here, because you know, for example, on Spotify, if you click a song, you play that song, you close down that song and you go to look for other songs, that song that you're playing is still playing in the background. Now, this seems very natural on an app like Spotify. However, it's a little bit more difficult when you're putting into practice in your own app. So this is very good practice on state management, but also all of the other things that we've talked about, such as real-time databases, such as more advanced UI. But it's a very fun project and it can be very, very CV worthy if you manage to actually build something that you can put out. Number 9 is another way of using APIs. I tried to build a news app. Then I realized, no, this isn't really for me, but this is an app that I built and I did learn a lot about using APIs with this. So there's plenty of different sources out there that you can grab an API from, and you can fetch news articles from various different sources. What I tried to do was I tried to make this as unbiased as possible. So I had another matching algorithm, or I wouldn't really call it an algorithm. I had another matching function in there that say if this article is coming from this organization, it's going to be skewing slightly right, politically speaking. If it's from this organization, it's going to be skewing slightly left. And then I tried to make an app that would display kind of, okay, this is this topic of tariffs maybe, and this is how the left-leaning media is approaching it, this is how the right-leaning media is approaching it, and here are some articles from the center, so that people could make up their own mind. And this you could progress and you could do something similar to what I did, or you could do it more complex even, or you could do it even more simple. But it's a pretty good way to work with, one, some more complex algorithms if you choose to go that route, but again, to work with some UI that needs to be very, very on point given the nature of the app, but also working with some more complex APIs, more complex than a weather app, for example. So that's definitely a project to check out. I think one of the more advanced projects that you can do is to build a full-scale clone of a social media app. I've tried this. I managed to build somewhat of a nice application. I tried to make a clone of Instagram back in 2023, where I have an old YouTube video about it. Worked pretty well, but then there are so many moving parts in these apps. There's a chat, there's a way to upload photos, there's a way to edit your profile, and what this simply becomes is a full-scale, full production app if you manage to launch it. So if you manage to do something similar, it's definitely CV worthy. If you can pull off something like this, you're pretty much ready for most software engineering jobs. Now, I'm exaggerating a bit because it depends on the niche you're in, but obviously you're very well prepared if you're able to pull off something like that. A way to approach this would be to set up a Firebase for storing all of the images, then handling all of the image displaying and uploading using a package in Flutter called Cached Network Image, where once you've loaded the image, that's going to stay there. Then using the path package as well as the storage functionality in Firebase to fetch a photo from your camera roll, upload that to Firebase and display that for all the users who are in your network. So then we get to another aspect of this, which is how can you integrate who's following who, and then indexing that and working with that in the database in the most efficient possible way. So as you can see, there's a lot of moving parts there, and there are a lot of things that can go wrong, and there's a lot of things that will go wrong, but it's a pretty big and it's a pretty fun project. And if you can put your own twist on it, so for example, make social media for netball players or something like that, or a platform to find entrepreneurs such as the one I've done, VenturePaths, you can also go check that one out in my app portfolio down below. That is my full-scale social media app. But I've also tried an Instagram clone, like I mentioned. It can be very rewarding and it can be very, very, very CV worthy. So those are just 10 projects that I have tried at some point during my app development career. I've obviously tried more projects, but these are the ones that I would start with and I would recommend someone trying if they're trying to truly learn software engineering and app development in particular from scratch. So if you like this type of content, then there's more in my WAP community down below. There's also some templates you can download to help you get started on your app development journey. It's completely free of charge, and if you like this type of content, then let me know down below. And subscribe, because it's also completely free of charge. It's a bargain. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.